Let's go, Rider Nation.
I'm ready. I'm ready. Yeah, here we go. Here we go. It's a feeling now. Get 'em high, get 'em low. 'Cause we're dealing now. Everybody's giving it all they got. 'Cause we're ready.
Welcome to the Piffles podcast, the podcast where we make fun of the Winnipeg Blue Bombers for losing Grey Cups. One of my favorite things. This is your Saskatchewan Roughriders fan podcast. You got me, as always. I'm Alex.
I'm Steve.
And I've been thinking, when the Bills lost all of their Super Bowls, the acronym became "Boy, I love losing Super Bowls." Like, Bombers is too long, so blue, I think, is our sweet spot. Like, Bombers lose ultimately every time.
Oh, I like that.
Bombers lose ultimately at the end. I don't know. I've been like working on things here. I don't know. So listeners, hit me up. I need an acronym for blue.
Hey,
And
they
the
do
best
hold the
one-
record for most Grey Cup losses now. Actually,
Yeah.
after last year, but
And the best acronyms that you can get for blue, Greg, we'll make signs and take them to the Banjo Bowl next year.
Hell, I'll make a shirt.
Someone in our group is probably going to get hit, and it's probably going to be me. But it's
I don't
worth
know. I
it
got a lot of friends are on the rum hunt, so we'll see what happens.
Are you sure?
He's been pretty quiet lately for some reason. I don't know why.
It's been very quiet on Blue Bombers social media. It's been kind of nice, actually. Thanks for listening wherever you get your podcasts, watching on YouTube, watching on SaskTel Max TV on demand. We appreciate it. Piffles Podcast. You can give us a follow on X at Piffles Pod. I'm at Real Alex D.
you can find me at Saphimod.
And as always, I do not need nor want your pity follows at Greg on Sports.
And we're also doing that Blue Sky thing because people are going over there. So we're there as well. Just search up Piffles Pod. And of course, check us out on Facebook as well. And the website, pifflespodcast.com. Just because the season's over doesn't mean the talk about the Riders is over. So there'll be plenty of stuff going up in the off season on the website there. And Piffles Podcast, of course, is brought to you by our great friends at Dairy Queen on Elphinstone Street and Sass Drive in Regina. All right, let's get into it. Let's talk about the Blue Bombers losing the Grey Cup. Time for the opening kickoff. And I just want to start out by saying, oh, the funny thing about sports fandom is, and I'm guilty of this, I think I take way more pleasure in watching another team lose, like the Bombers, than watching my own team win. And it's funny because I've learned as a Rider fan to accept that my team's not going to win all the time. They've won 4 times in 113, 14 years, whatever it is. So we have to resort to things like this, but we're going to have fun doing it. And
That just means we're experienced at it.
exactly. So,
Well, and the way I look at it is, this was the third best option that would happen this year. First would have been the Riders win. Second would have been considering the two teams in your stadium fire, and the third way is the Bombers losing. So I'm okay with it. It's not even the Argos winning; it's the Bombers losing, and I think a lot of people are missing that fact. That I was not cheering an Argos win; I was definitely cheering a Bombers lose. If they both could have lost, I would have been happy, but that just wasn't going to happen.
well, and the funny thing about that game, and the final score was 41-24, so it didn't look particularly close. It was 17-16 Toronto with 7 minutes left in the fourth quarter. So it was
And
there.
then what happened?
Well, and then a really interesting coaching decision after the touchdown by Toronto. I think that was the one by Dejan Brissett, where the Bombers only had 11 players on the field. So
They were using Zach's fingers to count.
Oh, yeah. So we might
I'm
have
surprised.
extra players on the field. They didn't have enough.
I'm surprised at how little talk there was, because Patrick Forsyth was mentioning in a group on WhatsApp. He's like, "Did anybody else see this?" And I went back and looked and saw 11 men. I'm like, "Yep, you're correct." And there was nothing, not a single word on social media until 2 days later. That's usually something you hear pretty quick about. It's kind of odd that it was.
Apparently, if you go
ignored.
back to the video, one of the Bombers guys was counting as the ball was being snapped. Like the fact that it got missed by the entire coaching staff of Winnipeg to not call a timeout, or were they out of timeouts at that point? I can't remember. But
No, they should have. They would have still had at least one left.
They had
Yeah.
for sure one, yeah.
So, like, the fact that got missed, like, I know everyone's blaming Zach, and Zach had a bad game, but that was probably one of the worst games I've seen coached by O'Shea since his first season.
And not even just O'Shea himself, but that was a very unlike the Bombers style performance. They were making mental errors. They were committing the misconduct penalty after the timeout when who was it that smacked the ball out of the center's hand? Like they were doing the things that you haven't seen a lot of during their successful run. Even in their Grey Cup losses, they weren't committing those kind of mental errors that we saw this Sunday against Toronto.
So it goes to that 2-point convert, or not going for a 2-point convert. We saw Corey Mace do that in the West semifinal against BC. So it was interesting to me that Toronto wouldn't go for 2 there to go up by 9 instead of going up by 8. Ultimately, it didn't matter. But the whole game changed on not just that touchdown, but then Zach Caleros getting hurt. So it was his finger, which apparently he could like see through his finger. That's how deep this cut was. They put him back in, and then of course proceeds to throw interception after interception after interception. Bad throws, bad reads, bad play calling. Everything just went against them, which is good. But what did you guys think of the final 7 minutes and what the Bombers did when it was still, I mean, the game was there?
The funny part is Zach's numbers actually got better in that last little stretch because they were actually catching the balls at that point. Going into
Are you saying they, as in the Argos, were catching the balls at that point?
Well, they
catch a
were
few.
actually. Yeah, like, hey, at least Zach finally threw a touchdown in a Grey Cup in the last 3 years.
It was the wrong team.
Almost threw a
It
couple.
was for the wrong team. Well, it was a touchdown.
Hey, and
But
props
the
to
fact
him
remains,
through that. Props to him through that finger injury. Sorry, to throw a Grey Cup record 164 yards and interception return yards. So
So
he
you're
did
saying
that.
he finally showed up on the stat line in a Grey Cup. So good for him.
Yeah.
But like going into that garbage time, like that's what it was. He only had 9 completions. He ended with 15. Like it wasn't a good performance before he got hurt. And like I said on X that I listened to Bombing and Zach go through their feelings on it because I was kind of curious on how they were processing it. And bless Darren Bombing, but he was basically trying to say, well, Zach's fingers was like that happened like late in the third quarter, or was that beginning of the fourth? Like it was late in the game. Like he was having a terrible game before that, and as bad as he's been playing, I honestly think you need to credit the Argos with a great defensive scheme on that one. Dembski didn't have a catch until the final like 6 minutes in the game. Like McManus should have been the MVP of that game.
He was 3 yards away from getting the MVP. If he scores that touchdown, there's no question he wins it.
Yeah. Like Arbuckle had a good game, but McManus was the most valuable player in that game by far. Arbuckle got it because the bias ranking goes quarterback, Canadian player, and somewhere down below is defensive player.
You have to show up like James Johnson in the 07 Grey Cup too.
He won that one by
pretty much.
default. No one else did anything.
You have to have those stats to even be considered at this point. If McManus didn't win it on Sunday, we're not going to see it anytime soon. They should honestly create a most outstanding defensive player for the Grey Cup. You have the Canadian player, you have the most outstanding player. Why not throw a defensive player in there too?
Too long of ceremonies. Which actually,
Yeah.
I want to bring that up too. The Grey Cup being handed to the president or MLSE not going to the players.
Yeah,
That was one
the
thing that
the ownership
is-
group. Yeah, that's so weird.
yeah, Randy Ambrosi handed it off to the ownership group, which the CFL is great for giving it to the players first, generally speaking. The NHL does that with the Stanley Cup, giving it to the captain of the winning team as well. And it's always nice because you look at baseball, you look at the Super Bowl, it's given out to the owners, and it's like that's so boring. Like, congratulations on writing a few checks. Like, give it to the guys who actually won the game. So it's a little disappointing to see that happen in this Grey Cup.
I'm hoping that's a one and done, because that just seemed like the minute I'm like, I don't recall that ever happening before. Like I'm trying, like, I'm going back in the database of my brain trying to figure out. I'm like, I don't think that's ever happened before.
Although they could do that next year in Winnipeg for Grey Cup. Give it to, well, who are the rider owners? Us. So we could.
Can you imagine if they gave it to Craig Reynolds? I think like half of
people
the
would
fan
lose their
base would puke in their mouths.
But that fourth quarter of the Grey Cup, the collapse by Winnipeg, how it happened, and just giving it away the way that they did was just so satisfying. There were so many fist pumps. There might have been a couple Degeneration X chops in my household.
There was definitely a lot in our chat. I know that.
A few dozen or so each time. Every time there was a turnover and then a Toronto touchdown, it was great. It really was. It was so good. And this puts the end, or does it, to the dynasty talk.
Easy Milt.
We got to bring him on to talk about that. Well, maybe not about that, but
if I hear the word dynasty out of one more Bombers fan, to the guy who said 3 in 10 years was enough, I hope you get nut punched by a toddler sometime in the next few days. No. That's a reach even for them, but like you said, there's moving the goalposts, and then there's, launching it out of the stadium. 3 and 6 is not a dynasty. Losing 3 consecutive Grey Cups, or the 3 feet as I called it, is not a dynasty. That is it. It is over. You are now 6 years removed from your first Grey Cup win in that collective. It's done. You want a dynasty? You start fresh next year.
Here's the problem: is they aren't, because that team ain't getting younger, and it looks like the players that barely showed up this year want to get more money.
Well, they're going to run it back with a lot of that same team because they're at home, and
they have to
still, and they still believe that's the group that can get it done, who has failed 3 times in the big game in a row. Now, props to Winnipeg for getting to the Grey Cup 5 straight times. That's impressive. I would love for the Riders to get there 5 straight times. Don't get me wrong. That's congratulations. You got to win them. Nobody calls the Buffalo Bills of the 90s a dynasty for losing 4 straight Super Bowls. It's just things I learned is that, like, the Riders of the 60s and 70s are basically a dynasty just because they got to a bunch of Grey Cups and lost. So I learned that this past weekend, and I saw somebody saying that the Stampeders of the 2000s were a dynasty. No, not even close. Montreal, no. They won a few, sure.
But they made 6 or 7 Grey Cups in 10 years, Alex.
And they lost like 5 of them.
But they made it. Isn't that enough?
Well, and I also learned that the Riders of 07 to 13 was a dynasty, which in all honesty,
if you discount that year that didn't happen.
Yeah, compared to Rider history, that is our dynasty right there. We call it, I mean, we go back and we look at it and we call it like the golden era of the Riders in terms of, championships and whatnot. And it was. But nobody has ever talked about a dynasty in that. So the dynasty is over. It's dead. I don't care what Milt Stiegel says. Congratulations on getting there 5 times. You lost.
What would he know about winning Grey Cups anyways?
Right, exactly.
Well, like I said, if with a guy with no rings, getting there is the accomplishment. But see, this is why he can't come to the show, because I'm going to make no rings jokes constantly.
Okay, well, let's get away from the game here. We'll talk about a little bit more of the Grey Cup stuff that happened, because I was there. I wasn't there for the game, but I was there for the festivities and everything. The Jonas Brothers halftime show. What did you guys think of the Jonas Brothers?
I
I
liked
missed it because I was taking my daughter to cheer. So
I thought it was solid. It wasn't aimed at our generation by any stretch. We're not the fan base that they're trying to reach with that one, but I think for what they wanted, they did solid. Also, I had no idea that one of the Jonas Brothers was in DNCE, whatever they call themselves, the Cake by the Ocean band.
Yeah,
I had no idea. When I was listening, I'm like, why the hell are they playing this song? Don't they have enough of their own?
that's
And
Joe Jonas,
sure
I
enough,
believe, right?
I
Joe?
think so. Yeah.
yeah.
I had no idea. I like how each of the Jonases had their own little, solo portion, and Kevin's just off in the background going, "Yeah, I'll just wait till the next Jonas Brothers song, I guess." It was good.
I thought it was
I enjoyed it.
I thought it was a fine enough show. My only complaint about it is it seemed like they were very low energy for songs that could have been a little bit higher energy. So if they would have played it up a little bit more, I think it would have just taken it to the next level for me. But again, I know those songs. I know of those songs. I've heard them before, but they're not trying to get me to watch the game. I'm already going to watch the game. So from all accounts, it was a good stage show. Everything looked good from the videos I saw from people at the game, and generally people liked it. So, I mean, that's a win right there for the league when you can get a big name get like that and have everybody generally say that was a good show. Then they did something right. So congratulations to the league for getting that.
I still wish people would understand that the halftime act is probably not for you. So
It's
don't
for your
need to hear
television
how the-
audience. It's not for the people that are there. It's not for the people that are gonna watch the game. Fans of the CFL are gonna watch the Grey Cup regardless. It's for those who aren't planning on watching the game. So, before we get into Greg's rant, and I hope you have some notes on that, Greg, because I know you have a lot to say coming up about player awards.
I got to admit though, I'm not. I've calmed down since Thursday, Friday, whatever day it was. I've calmed down.
I told you you guys should have started a show Thursday night after it happened and called me, and we could have done it from wherever I was, Spirit of Edmonton that night, and we could have done it there. But I just wanted to give a quick little recap of the team parties, how BC hosted. The outside festival was great. The inside stuff at the convention centers was excellent. Overall, it was like a pretty well put together Grey Cup event. But the team party rooms were disappointing to me. And I think it was because of a lack of people there. I don't know if that was just because the lack of locals there, just because the BC Lions weren't in the game, so people kind of tuned out a little bit. But it was very low key in the biggest rooms. So in the convention center, obviously Bomber House was filled all the time because, well, Winnipeg was in it, right? But Riderville, BC Lions Den, Spirit of Edmonton, the three biggest rooms. The few times I went down to BC Lions Den and Riderville, dead. Absolutely dead. I'm talking like 60 people tops in those rooms. Spirit of Edmonton ended up becoming the best one out of them all. And it was nice because they were actually in the convention center with all the other team parties, which normally isn't the case for Spirit of Edmonton. But now that they're, being propped up by the Elks and included by the league now, they were there with them. But overall, I was kind of just disappointing in that sense. Great people, obviously, that go to Grey Cup, see the CFL family from across the country, and it was wonderful. But it just felt lacking something. Like there was no buzz in the city. And I think that's what attributed to that in the team parties.
I think, unfortunately, with a market like Vancouver and your Torontos, where, and it's not for lack of trying on Doman's part. He's really trying to get that buzz back, but they got so much stuff going on all the time. Like I think next year in Winnipeg, it's probably going to be a lot bigger buzz. Even hopefully the Bombers aren't in it, but I think you're going to get that there. You're going to get that here. It's just something different when the entire market is behind it. But that being said, everything I've seen looks like BC did one hell of a job with everything they did. So when you have an owner that is that forward looking, I think they're going to be in a good spot here in the next couple of years.
The one thing I really like that I saw, and I know you mentioned it when you were talking to us about it, there was something like 6,000 kids running around the festival area with BC Lions gear and just taking in the festivities. And the one thing this league has always had an issue with is growing that younger market. Your middle-aged guys, like our generation, is either going or they never will. You're not getting anybody new from our generation. It's that young generation, the next generation, that has to continue to prop up the league. And I think BC and the organizing committee and Amar Doman did a fantastic job of making sure some kids got to experience a Grey Cup festival, because that's something they will remember and something that might get them to talk their parents into going to a game next year. That's all it really takes to start growing that next generation.
Yeah, on the Thursday afternoon, I walked in. So there's two convention centers. The one had all the galas and the team parties, and the other one had the free stuff, the fan zone, all that kind of stuff. A lot more of the family oriented things. So they had a mini field inside. They had a little spot where you can jump and catch a ball and get your picture taken while you're diving for a catch, that kind of stuff. And so I went in there and it's packed, but I look, I'm like, there's a lot of kids here. Like, what is going on? Turns out both Thursday and Friday, there was school groups, classrooms that went. So, and again, like you said, Steve, they were all wearing BC Lions shirts, orange shirts. And it was just so fantastic to see. And they all looked like they were having a good time. And when that's how you do it. That's how you get them in. And even if not even half those kids, if a third of those kids, so what, 2,000 kids go to the parents and say, I had so much fun. I want to get into this. I want to go to a game now and see what else there is. Well, they already have a shirt to wear to the game. So maybe mom and dad buy a hat at the game for them. And it just grows and grows and grows. So I know it's little steps. I know we're always looking for that quick fix to change things around. It's not going to happen. That's not how business generally works. It will take time, but the stones are there in place for the CFL. They've done such a good job, and BC just did a wonderful job of getting kids there, and everybody loved it. Although trying to find people my age there was very difficult. So luckily I ran into one of the kids that was there, was Superfan Mike of the Turf District podcast. It was his kid that was there. So I was able to link up with the Turf District guys. So that was pretty cool.
I thought you were saying Superfan Mike was one of the kids that was there. Like, yeah, that tracks too.
He was kind of running around a little bit. He was having fun. Yeah.
Did you run the 40?
No, I didn't even walk the 40. But what was actually cool about that, the little field that they had there is TSN was doing some panel stuff there on Friday, and they were doing their Sports Center hits and whatnot. And it was Kate and Bo, Henoch Muamba, and Matt Dunnigan. And I was wearing my Birmingham Barracudas jersey. And right after they finished their tape hit there, Dunnigan kind of like jumps down into the crowd and like pushes people aside and says, I got to see that guy right there, and shake his hand, and came up to me and was like, oh my God, who has a Birmingham Barracudas jersey? Of course, he played there in 95. But then right after that is people wanted to try and stop and talk to him and take a picture and everything. He grabbed a football and was just throwing it with the kids for probably a good solid 20 minutes at least. And just, yeah, a couple people tried to, stop him and everything, but like he was very quick about grabbing a football again and throwing it to the kids and not even talking to the adults that was there. So it was a very good event for children. And it's something that I think all 8 other CFL cities or provinces can look at duplicating and just get kids out there, get them in gear and let them have some fun. So it was a good Grey Cup week, except for the player awards. Of course, Roland Milligan won Defensive Player of the Year, which was no surprise to us. He had his wife Samantha there as well, and his newborn child. So that was pretty cool that he was able to get them up here. Corey Mace lost Coach of the Year to Jason Moss. I'm not too upset about that. I think Mace should have beat him, but they usually just give it to the coach with the best record, so whatever. But the one that really bothered me, and Greg, I'll let you take lead on this, was Logan Ferland not winning Most Outstanding Offensive Lineman. Instead, it was Ryan Hunter of the Argos, who, not taking anything away from him, very good season, played 2 different positions, was excellent at both. Just think Logan Ferland deserved it more. Greg, go ahead.
And you know it's serious because Greg actually did homework for this.
I did. So I actually went, okay, so thanks to CFL's new relationship with Pro Football Focus, they rate every position every week. I went through every week to see who was the top rated offensive lineman every week. Argos graded out most of the year as the best offensive line as a unit, which is fine. They have some really good guys there. Hunter, so Logan Ferland was scored 3 times best of his position, twice as guard, once as tackle, never as a center. Once he moved to center, he was never graded because there's some really good centers in this league, and Ferland was just there's just stopgap. Let's be honest. Hunter just once. Even though the Argos were the highest rated line, he only scored once. Dijon Allen, he wasn't even the best offensive lineman on his team. Dijon Allen also was ranked the best offensive lineman each for the week 3 times. So if it would have been Allen versus Ferland, I think I would have been okay, maybe. Like I don't get it. 3 Down Nation did their like in-house polling, their vote on it. They also picked Hunter, and they're like, because he played 2 positions. Ferland played all 5.
Ferland started at 4 of them and excelled at every single one of them.
Like,
you want to talk about outstanding? That's outstanding.
I don't know what you need to do more than play all 5 positions and start at 4 of them. I guess if he would have started at all 5, maybe they would have gave it to him.
And the fact the vote wasn't even close. What was it? 41-16? Like, are you kidding me?
That's what made me mad. That is what made me mad. Like, if it was, I even think the Mace Moss one, it was too far of a stretch, even though it was pretty close.
I got a story on that. I got to tell you about that, the Mace vote.
But the fact remains is this wasn't even close. So that tells you no one watches the games. It was just it was so bad.
Eastern bias.
And to me, the most impressive part of Logan Ferland's season wasn't just that he played 4 or 5 different positions. It was the fact that he played 4 or 5 different positions beside 12 different guys at points in the season and never once looked like he was out of place, never once looked like he didn't belong as a starting caliber player or all-star caliber player at the position he was playing. And honestly, you said, he was a stopgap at center. A lot of people think that was his best position of the year, that the team was at their best when Logan Ferland was playing center.
My favorite
to shine at all of those positions consistently throughout the year, and with the level of injuries that the Riders had to face, and still for the Eastern Seaboard to basically ignore the fact that teams west of Toronto exist it's a joke at this point.
And the weirdest thing is, so the CFLPA put out their version of the All Stars this year, or the All CFL, whatever the hell they want to call them. I guess they call theirs the All Stars. Neither guy made the offensive line either.
Yeah, that was weird.
It was just like, I don't get the voting. I really don't get it.
I've stopped trying to make sense of any of this at this point.
Well, it's funny because speaking of just weird voting, I was going back finalizing some CJFL stuff. The 2-time winning CJFL most outstanding defensive player, Stephen Smith from the Regina Thunder, was not the best linebacker in the league somehow. He was
don't get that.
he didn't wasn't first team all Canadian either. And I'm like, how does that make sense? You just said he was the best player in the league for the second straight year. Like, voting and all-star teams and awards, none of it makes sense because everyone tries to split their vote. That's what it is. It's just like, well, I can't vote for this guy because that's not fair, or I want to make this guy better.
So I'll vote the other guy. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's just, and that is why I believe these need to start being public. I truly believe there needs to be transparency on this because it makes no sense. Because unfortunately, a lot of these guys' contracts have bonuses based on whether or not they are an all CFL or whether or not they get an award. So let's find out who's like, why they're voting on this. Like, there needs to be transparency on it.
Well, look at Lucius Purifoy. He lost his mind after the All-Star nominations because he
one second. On a scale of 1 to Earls,
$2,000 full Earls. He lost $2,000 to a guy with substantially lower stats across the board because Duquois was a Canadian and, again, played out east. These votes, no matter where they're coming from, are starting to get a little questionable at best. And I agree, transparency would make it at least a little more honest.
So I said I had a story about the Coach of the Year voting. So it was pretty close between Mace and Moss. Moss won by, 4 votes? 5 votes, something like that. The coaches vote on this as well. Corey Mace said that he voted for Jason Moss. And you're allowed to vote for yourself. If he would have voted for himself, now you're down to 2 votes. You get one other person to flip their vote, and all of a sudden it's a tie. So just thought it was pretty funny that he voted for the winner when he could have picked himself and would have been just that much closer to possibly taking home the hardware, which really weird hardware this year.
Weird trophies this year.
These weird small trophies that look like miniature hammers or something. And that's what the Grey Cup MVP was. That's what Roland Milligan was walking around with his Defensive Player of the Year award in Riderville on Friday night. And like, it's just a small little trophy. Like, it was weird. Like, is the league cheaping out on these right now? Because these have the nice, big plaques and everything, but
somebody had to make a Dollarama run right before the event because they forgot to get trophies.
Maybe, honestly, that's kind of what it looked like. But
imagine winning the MOP of the championship game and you get something that, fits barely in the palm of your hands and looks like a child's toy.
Yeah. Why does this say World's Greatest Grandpa on it?
We also do have to give a shout out to Jorgen Hughes winning the Jake Adar Veterans Award, which is essentially for service to the community. Guy that provides,
and we thank him for his service because by history he's not going to be here next year.
Yeah, so the Riders have won this 3 straight years. It was Dan Clark next season, gone. Who won it last year?
Linnaeus.
Braden Linnaeus, yeah, gone. And now Jorgen Hughes. So
The good
but-
news is nobody remembers long snappers until they mess up, and he never messes up, so you'll never hear his name. So you won't have to worry about him getting cut.
but just goes to show the riders in the community doing great work continues. And congratulations, Jorgen. Really quick here, just as we kind of wrap up the opening kickoff here, some rider news as well. 10 signings for the riders. A lot of these guys were on the practice roster to end the year, so or bringing back guys that were on the expanded practice roster. So riders are going to bring back defensive lineman Eric Black, defensive back Antoine Brooks Jr., punter Joe Couch, quarterback Michael Hires, which we knew about a couple weeks ago, linebacker Braxton Hill, defensive back Robert Javier. Again, we'll have to figure that out, find out what it is. Offensive lineman Daniel Johnson, who they drafted this year in the draft. Braden Knoll, offensive lineman, another Canadian there. Zach Fillion, linebacker, Canadian as well. And then a new guy, defensive back Alfahim Walcott. So
you said that better than I thought, because I'm looking at them like, I have no idea how you say that.
I practiced a few times. I'm not gonna lie. When I saw that, I was like, I'm going to slow that down and practice it, and hopefully I didn't butcher it on them. But some rider signings there, guys. Hopefully coming to training camp next year. Well, that's the opening kickoff presented by Kathy Festian of Royal LePage Regina Realty. Jumping to our Churchill Brewing Company odds and end zones, and we're still going to kind of keep the Grey Cup theme going here. We will talk a little bit more riders in a minute here. Just want to give a huge shout out to CFL fans across the country, rider fans that helped out with this CFL Fans Fight Cancer event at Grey Cup. Totaled $75,000, which is unbelievable. A couple years ago when we hosted the event, we beat the record significantly, and we got it to 24,000. They tripled that in just 2 years. So this whole thing has taken off. The league's gotten behind it. The teams have gotten behind it now. It's a year-round fundraiser, which is fantastic. And it's great to see. I mean, I saw people legit arguing about players and mad at each other at Grey Cup week, but this is something that we can all agree on. It's a fantastic cause. So $75,000 raised across the country. Again, we had a couple fundraisers as well this year, so thank you for donating to that and helping CFL Fans Fight Cancer hit $75,000. Unbelievable.
It's absurd to me to see how much that number has grown over the last few years, and to see the event change from what was a one-day event with a few people have always had their events. Like I know, was it Wally always has his wristbands and buttons and things like that. Like there's always been, people selling things throughout, but to see it grow into an event that starts effectively as soon as last season's ends and run for a damn near calendar year is incredible. And to watch people come up with new ways to do it. We did the dunk tank in 2022. You look now, Chris did his 9 stadium Guinness record tour and raised money along the way. And there's been other things all throughout it. Everybody's coming up with new and interesting ways to raise money. And it's really fun to watch it grow the way it has. I'm excited to see what Winnipeg can do with the event next year.
All right, I want to talk a little bit about the Calgary Stampeders and Kadeem Carey post game after winning the Grey Cup. Basically said Dave Dickenson is the reason for the decline in Calgary. And I would just like to thank the Calgary Stampeders and mostly Jay McNeil for allowing Dave Dickenson to continue on his role in 2025 as GM head coach. So that makes me happy. But when you look at all the
everyone knows this is
former
special teams'
Stamps,
fault.
yeah, when you look at the former Stampeders on this Grey Cup winning Argos team, there's quite a few of them. And when they're starting to say that the head coach is the reason for the decline, that ain't good.
No, it's like you said, it's not just the head coach; he's also the GM. Like Dickenson under Huffnagel, they had the secret sauce going. Huffnagel's found the players, and Dickenson had the talent to do what he wanted them to do. Once he started wearing two hats, he just hasn't been able to replace the players that they lose. Like it was whenever a guy went down in Calgary, his replacement was just as good, if not sometimes better than the guy the guy that went down. That's not the case anymore. They're having trouble rolling out a quarterback. They're having trouble having receivers that can actually catch a ball. They just aren't as good as they used to be, and I think a big problem of it is Dickinson's not a good GM, and he's just overworked as a head coach.
I saw a couple of Stamps fans mention that, oh, this was just sour grapes from a guy that was cut by the Stampeders. The dude just won the Grey Cup. Just celebrating a championship trophy in the middle of the celebration of everything that's going on. There was no sour grapes there. That is a guy at the pinnacle of his career just telling it like it is. He has no reason to go after Calgary right there. He is celebrating a championship. We have all been saying it for the better part of a year now that Dickenson is part of the problem. And because of his multiple hats, he is part of the problem twice. It's just not working. I hope he gets a long-term extension in Calgary as GM and head coach, because it's about time they enjoy some suffering. They have had a long period of success. It's our turn now.
But even if you look at last year, they put Mueller in the role of calling the plays, and then immediately Dickenson takes back the role basically because he didn't like what Mueller was doing. Like he was micromanaging instead of taking some responsibilities off his plate. He had to micromanage it. Like no wonder Mark wanted to leave.
And look what Mueller did here.
Yeah.
Solid work as an offensive coordinator.
Yeah.
Trust your guys.
Mm-hmm.
That's good management. Trust that what you have there is good, and let them do their jobs. And hopefully that sticks with both Dickinsons. Maybe Dave can be the GM and Craig can be the head coach for a while. That can be the next 10-year tandem.
Oh my Lord! If any team makes Craig Dickenson their head coach, they deserve what they get.
A bowling tournament?
Now, the interesting thing with the offseason now upon us is all the movement that's going to happen with management, and we're going to see that with BC and Edmonton. BC is going to move on from Rick Campbell. His contract is up as head coach. Sounds like he's might be heading east, one province over, to a place that just hired their new GM, the Edmonton Elks. Just hired Ed Hervey. So what's old is new again in Edmonton.
They are mainlining nostalgia. Like that is all they're doing right now.
This is a team that is literally trying to do anything they can to focus on the EE. Anything that had the Eskimos name back in the day, whether it was 40 years ago, whether it was 10 years ago, they're bringing them back. This is what this team is doing. They might not do the name change, but they're going to do everything they can to get as close to possible without doing so. So I don't know. I got nothing on who they hire as GM. I don't really care. It doesn't really affect me, but it's just sad that they're going back to the well when they just can't move on.
Well, we knew this was coming when Larry Thompson was hired, because he said, or bought the team, because his first thing was he was going to bring back the Eskimo way. Who's his first hire? Craig Morris, former Edmonton Eskimo. Who's his first hire? Ed Hervey. They're not even trying to hide their plans. They were quite open about what they intended to do when he bought the team at that very first, very exciting, well-spoken press conference from Larry.
Oh, he's a firecracker. They need to put him in front of a mic any chance they get.
Yeah, they need him in front of a mic like the Calgary Stampeders need Dave Dickinson's long-term extension. just I don't understand it. There's nothing wrong with Ed Hervey as a GM. I don't think it's necessarily a bad choice, but it's a predictable one. We could have basically called this succession from day one.
And of course, they're going after they're looking at Campbell because, of course, Hugh Campbell. They like I said, they are just mainlining nostalgia constantly. I cracked a joke, or like, are they going to see if Warren Moon can come out and play because he was the best quarterback they ever had? Like trying to get Normie Kwong's ghost to come out and play running back. Like, I don't understand.
What's Brian Kelly up to?
Like, this is just ridiculous. Like, I understand they are craving the glory days, and they truly believe in their heart of hearts that the name change changed the direction of this franchise, and if they were still the Eskimos, they'd have another 5 Grey Cups and blah 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 blah. Like, yes, Hervey is a decent enough GM. Yes, Campbell is a decent enough coach, and they're probably going to be better because of it. But the fact remains is G-Roy was doing an okay job with the hand he was dealt. One thing that Chris Jones is very good at is leaving a mess behind him that other people have to clean up. So he was working his way through it, but it's just, I don't know. Like, we are 2 years away from it then we call the Eskimos again. I can just feel it in my bones.
Seems to be trending that way. Okay, now back to the Rider talk. Throughout on X, we put a poll up. We're going to start taking a look at the Riders' positional groups in the offseason here, who they have, where they need to upgrade from, where they don't need to upgrade from. And so I put quarterbacks, offensive line, and defensive backs, I think is what I put up for this one. And to no surprise, here in Saskatchewan, people want to talk about the quarterbacks.
No.
So, even though we did this last week, to an extent, we'll do this for a little bit this week as well. We got a little bit of time to do that. So, as of right now, who they're bringing back? Well, they have Michael Hires, who we just mentioned that they signed. He was here for a few weeks as the practice rosters expanded. We don't really know anything about him. So, next season, we'll see if he can crack the practice roster, basically, is what we're hoping out of it, something like this. Well, let's go to Jack Cohn. He's the next guy under contract. Now, Cohn was 10 of 21, had 100 yards, a touchdown. He had 3 rushes for 14 yards in his only action of the season. That was the final game against Calgary. He was 6 of 8 for 40 in preseason against Winnipeg, and 1 of 3 for 3 yards against Edmonton in the second preseason game. So very small sample size, but going back to that Calgary game where we saw him the most, showed some flashes, I guess.
Those are Zach Collaros numbers.
Who does he think he is, right? He could be starting in Grey Cups with those numbers. But he did have that touchdown.
He threw a touchdown pass, so no.
Touche, yeah. Did show some flash in that game. And, of course, that was with a B team around him.
Yes.
A lot of C team around him, too. Obviously, not going to be the starter next year. Guy you want to try and develop. Can he get to the next level next year? This is a guy that I would expect should be leading for the third quarterback who could possibly push for the backup quarterback position next year. Maybe not right off the bat, but throughout the year, that's where I'd like to see him progress. So those are the 2 guys for sure that are under contract for next year. What did you guys think of Jack Cohn anyway, when we did see a little bit out of him against Calgary? Was that enough to bring him back for next year?
He's shown he's got the talent, obviously. I think, obviously, his first year in the CFL game, bigger field, 1 less down. You can tell a few of the plays that he made where he should have been throwing for the sticks. He was expecting he was going to have another down to throw. So he needs to learn the game and refine a bit, and like I said, based on that one feature that Vanstone put out, the team is high on him. Even Trevor Harris is very high on him. They were talking about him as the next heir apparent, completely bypassing Patterson. So obviously he's got some big supporters in this in the front office. So hopefully he can back it up.
I think that part alone tells you what their plans are for him. He did enough to me to get a call back and to get a legitimate shot at that 3 spot. Beyond that, he's going to need a lot more seasoning. He's very fresh, very green. But there's definitely potential there. He showed it in bits and pieces in that Calgary game, more in the preseason than anything. But you can't really hold that game against them. The Calgary game, nobody showed up. His best receiving threat was Colton Hunchak. So,
So that brings us to Shea Patterson. Greg, you just mentioned Patterson's going to be a free agent. 1,655 yards passing in his 6 starts, 7 games basically. Through 6 touchdowns, 5 interceptions. So having a positive touchdown to interception ratio to me is a good thing. Obviously, like that number to be a little bit higher in the touchdowns, less in the interceptions, obviously, but not terrible. Actually, that's better than Zach Caleros for most of the season, for being completely honest. Also had 7 touchdowns carrying the ball on the ground, most quarterback sneaks there. 2-3-1 record in his 6 games that he started. Not really going to knock that last Calgary loss on him, but also that game as well. What did you, before we talk about should they bring him back, what did you guys think of Shea Patterson this year? This was his 3rd season in the league, 2nd with the Riders. First one to really get a chance on the field to show what he has with that injury to Trevor Harris.
I said it last week. I don't want to see Shea Patterson anywhere near this roster next year. This was his chance to really break away as the clear number 2, and I don't think he did it. He looked okay at times. He gives you a decent running threat, except on 3rd and short. He gives you no running threat at all, other than sideways. And if for no other reason than his inability to run a short yardage package, I don't want to see him here. I've seen enough. I'd rather them look at a legitimate backup. We saw with Toronto what happens if you have a legitimate backup behind your starter. On the flip side, we saw in Winnipeg what happens if you don't. Shea Patterson is not that guy to me. I think they could do better, and I think they will do better in the offseason.
That being said, I think Corey Mace would have, God forbid, Trevor Harris was missing a finger. I'm pretty sure they wouldn't have rolled Trevor Harris back out there, and they would have went with Shea Patterson. Although they could have went to Jake Dolegala. He was apparently there. I completely forgot he signed in Winnipeg. But anyways, back to Patterson. Yeah, you're right. I don't want him here next year. Unless he's going to, God forbid, unless they think he can actually compete for starter, there's no reason to bring him back because he can't run the short yardage. And we've seen enough of him. They need to find someone to actually be that number 2. Hell, they might need to find someone to be that number 1 if they can't get that sorted out. So, and Patterson ain't that guy. I think you bring someone else in.
I think in this offseason where you look at the array of quarterbacks that are going to be available in the offseason, there are a lot of free agent quarterbacks, starters and legitimate backup possibilities. If they roll back with Trevor Harris, Shea Patterson, and Jack Cohn as their top 3, I think they've failed this team as a whole.
I think with Patterson, I felt good about him at the start after Trevor Harris got hurt because he had that win against Toronto. Then he had a win against Winnipeg as well, too. The other games, not so good. The games were close, though, so it's not like he was awful by any means. But it just never felt like he kept taking that next step. He plateaued and then just kind of streamlined and sank a little bit. That last game against Calgary frustrated me just for that reason. Is I know you're again with the B and the C team around you, and just everything was deflated in that game after that stupid gust of wind. I'm with you guys. I don't think he needs to be brought back. They can do better. They should do better than that. If they do bring him back, I can't see him being any more than I can't even say a backup right now, number 2. But at that point, he's that short yardage. Steve, you said it perfectly on that. Like, he just struggled so much with that short yardage that I don't see a role for him on this team going forward.
Like,
So,
we forget last year they went out and got Pipkin because Patterson couldn't do the short yardage. And some reason they thought this year Patterson would get it together, and he just didn't.
He got progressively worse.
Yes.
Yeah. So we're not seeing him go up. We're seeing him regress. And once somebody regresses, especially at quarterback, see ya. You know what he turned out to be? And it was funny because this is kind of full circle for Shea Patterson. He ended up becoming Mason Fine. He was okay.
Except
He beat Mason Fine out for that number 2 job in training camp, which we were all happy about. But he was Mason Fine. He was fine. Wasn't good. Wasn't terrible. But time to move on.
you could put him in there and trust him to not actively lose a game, but he wasn't going to win it either.
Yeah, enough to keep it close, but still need some help to get that win, right? So need to find somebody better, whether it's a veteran backup, whether it's going to be a younger one as well, too, somebody with a little bit of experience. There's going to be plenty of options available, and I'm sure one of those will be making their way to Riderville. Which brings us to our final name. Of course, QB1, Trevor Harris, was 20 touchdowns, 9 interceptions, a couple touchdowns rushing as well. He actually ran the short yardage better than Shea Patterson did. What was most important about Trevor Harris, while he was 6th in passing, 4th in touchdowns, number 1 quarterback efficiency in the league, he had the 7-4 record. And a few of those losses were right when he first came back from injury, and can't really place those losses on him. There was the game in Montreal, the game in Toronto. There was a couple, and then Badger Bowl and Labor Day. So yes, he could have done better in those games, but it's not like they lost the games because of him. So
That game in Toronto, those interceptions from the end zone.
Yeah, there was more.
There's more.
That score did flatter the Riders, honestly.
Oh,
yeah.
The defense balled out on that. The defense balled out on that one.
All those goal line stands.
That short yardage defense.
That was a fun game to be at until the end.
It was, actually. But the 7-4 record, that speaks volumes. The guy was winning games for us, and he was the best bet for the Riders. And where I see the Riders are right now, going into 2025, they're going to be in win now mode.
Mm-hmm.
They're close. They can see what it takes, and I think they're going to learn that in the offseason. And another year with Corey Mace, another year with Mark Mueller growing as an offensive coordinator. I think they want to keep that collective group together and just that cohesion. I don't think they want to have another offensive coordinator and quarterback pairing, I guess, to start next year. So that would be 3 straight years where we'd have a change there. Don't want to see that. That's just too much. Keep the continuity going. So I do believe that they will bring back Trevor Harris as QB1. I don't even think they go after another guy until you get whatever backup in free agency. I think Harris is QB1, gives them their best chance to win now, which is what the Riders are going for. And I just don't see a way where it's anyone other than Trevor Harris as QB1. And I'm okay with that. With a team ready to win now, you kind of need the vet to take you there as quarterback. Guess that means Harris is the guy.
one of two things is going to happen. They're either going to sign Harris before Christmas, or they're going to do something wild and like trade for Vernon Adams' rights. That's the only two things I can see happening. I don't see them actively pursuing another quarterback unless it's Trevor Harris.
Not to give Greg any credit, but when he wrote about this, the words "if not Trevor, then who?" It's accurate. There is nobody else right now that can lead this team going forwards and give them the best chance of success. This isn't the year you take a shot on a guy like Davis Alexander. Even a guy like Vernon Adams, I'm not sure I trust him with a Mark Mueller style offense. This is not a home run hitting offense. This is a dink and dunk down the field precision style offense, and there is not a better quarterback in the CFL at short yardage accuracy than a Trevor Harris. I think we're at least a year, if not more, away from a potential succession plan. I think we roll back with Trevor Harris, and I am not just okay with that, I'm hoping for that.
Which is funny because I know a lot of fans are hoping that we move on from Trevor Harris and go younger, which generally speaking is not always a bad thing to do. If you can save some money and go younger, try and find the franchise guy, but
and I get that, but as close as this team is, and I hate the overemphasis on quarterback usually, but the quarterback is one of your major positions. You've got a strong offensive line already. Running game needs to be figured out. You've got some great receivers. Like, you do not want to change that position right now when next year we were half a game out of first place. We were a wind gust away from first place, which I argue kept us from the Grey Cup because there's no way Winnipeg was coming here and winning. Winnipeg is a way different team at home than they are anywhere else.
mm-hmm.
I actually have notes on that too. I meant to discuss that earlier about Winnipeg, but I'll go quickly. They're 7-2 at home, 4-5 on the road, and they should have lost here. They should have lost in Montreal. They should have been a 2-7 team on the road. So, but the fact remains is you don't want to change your quarterback when you're in a win now mode, because you do that and then it's all chaos.
And I've said before, I think in pro football, not just the CFL, this includes the NFL, you have your top tier guys. You have a couple elite ones. You have a group of really good ones. And then there's everybody else. And somewhere down there below them is Jake Mayer. The average quarterbacks now, and you see this in the NFL, they're so similar to each other that there's so many of them that maybe it's because the position got so good, I guess, is that what we see as elite isn't that just doesn't happen anymore. There's no guys that really stand out above the rest. NFL, you have Josh Allen, you have Lamar Jackson. Maybe you can throw Joe Burrow, right? Like there's a couple of them that you can say are the top talents in the CFL. There really isn't one. Bo Levi Mitchell for the stats this year, I guess, was the guy, but didn't make the playoffs. And I know quarterback wins isn't a real stat and it's a team game, but when there's so few excellent quarterbacks out there and you have a very, very good one, I just don't see how you can move on.
If quarterback wins are not a if wins are not a quarterback stat, how the hell did Bo Levi Mitchell not win MOP? Just saying.
Like I said,
who you
rankings
talk
go quarterback from the East that wins, quarterback from the West that wins, Canadian athlete, quarterback from the East that loses. I have the entire bias rankings out there, Steve.
And then it's defensive players, punters. Jake
No,
Mayer.
defensive players way back. Kickers are at the bottom. There's no way. But yeah. Canadian defensive players in there somewhere too.
Kicker's the Jake Mayer of winning. But when it all comes down to it, when you have a good quarterback, you don't want to move on from it. Like, unless you're getting something better. Greg, you wrote about it. I don't know who's better that's available. Maybe Bo Levi Mitchell.
But he's not
But-
available. He's still under contract.
Right? Like,
He's not
it's-
playing under that contract. Ask him.
No, yeah, he also
Well,
said he's
that's all these guys saying they're not playing under their contract this year is wild. It's going to be interesting to see what happens.
so.
But if Hamilton
There you
moves
go.
on, who are they going to? Like, that's the other thing is, like, Bo's
Yeah.
kind of got him where he wants him.
Well, and right now, quarterbacks, and this is everywhere, have all the leverage. Are you going to find better than me? Probably not. So, pay me.
The only quarterback without any leverage somehow is Vernon Adams. The guy on an MOP level run is the is the one without leverage.
At least he's got, what, $300K guaranteed to him next year? 50%
Well,
of his
that too,
salary.
yeah.
So,
Technically speaking, the only
buys a lot of
quarterback
tissues to cry into.
right now, the quarterback that can write his own check right now is Davis. I'd argue is Davis Alexander, and that's if Montreal wants to move him. Like, he technically speaking, they're both him and Cody are still under contract next year, I believe.
Cody's under contract for one
Davis
more
is not.
year. Davis is a free agent.
Yes. So I'd argue he's might be the only one that can write his own check right now.
But again, smaller sample size. Do you
Yes.
want to get caught with that, right? Like, unless you
Someone
know.
will.
Oh, absolutely. Drew Brown, right? Small sample size in Winnipeg, but did pretty well in Ottawa. He seems like he's going to be a pretty good CFL starter, but that doesn't happen all the time. So many of these guys just flame out after a couple good games, and then not saying that's going to happen with Davis Alexander, but that's the trend we see. So it's hard to say that you should go all in on the guy when you haven't seen much.
See Arbuckle Nick, and don't get me wrong, he's Grey Cup MVP this year, but there's a big hype coming out of him. Went to Ottawa, nothing happened. Went to Edmonton, nothing happened. Went to Toronto, went somewhere else after that, I believe. Back to Edmonton, I don't know. Anyway, back to Toronto.
Back to
Almost
Toronto.
retired, and then became the MOP. Like, it's a weird game.
So there you go. Quarterbacks. I'm sure I really think we'll see a signing announcement sometime in December of Trevor Harris for possibly 2 years. I can really see it being 2 years.
I don't see it being a 1 year. I don't see them putting him in a lame duck for next year.
No, not with the contracts that they have with the coaching staff in place. I think they lock themselves to Trevor Harris for the remainder of their contracts. So it'll be interesting. It's going to be a good off season. And again, quarterback, no matter what, even after Harris resigns, which we all agree is going to happen, people are going to lose their minds over it and say, why didn't we do this? Why didn't we do that? And that's what we love about Rider fans. We're always talking quarterbacks, and that's always fun. So we'll see what happens, I guess. Next week we'll throw it back out to the listeners again to see which you guys which positional group we should take a look at. Maybe we'll focus on a defensive one. We'll jump back and forth, offense, defense. So maybe we'll throw the defensive ones up there, see who you guys want to hear us talk about. But I think that's going to do it. Unless you guys have anything else this week.
Let's
Can
talk
we just
about
spend another minute laughing about the Bombers.
Well,
Yeah,
that
remember
too,
how the
and
Bombers-
our pick'em. I fair homed it.
You did.
Lost
I-
to you
I
by
would just
one
like
game.
to say, for the greater good, I picked Winnipeg. You are
It wasn't,
welcome.
it wasn't going to make a
CFL.
difference anyway, Steve. You
Yeah.
were way
Not for my
behind anyway.
record. Not for my record, but I had to make that pick. You know how dirty it was for me to pick the Bombers in a Grey Cup championship game? But I did it for you, Rider Nation. I did that for you.
For 8 fan bases, really.
Yeah.
Oh, maybe not Hamilton.
No, Hamilton.
Yeah. Their whole existence is based off Toronto sucking. So yeah. All right.
But even they have to hate Winnipeg a little bit after the 2 Grey Cup losses. You'd think the hate is there.
It's
Not
just
enough
Who,
to
who
surpass
hasn't Hamilton
Toronto.
lost to in a Grey Cup though?
Valid
touche.
point.
Touche. Well, we'll leave it there, and we'll pick up the conversation again next week, talking more riders, hopefully some re-signings, and we'll see what happens over the next week. Piffles Podcast brought to you by our great friends at Dairy Queen on Elphinstone Street and Sass Drive in Regina. Special thanks, of course, to Kathy Festian of Royal LePage Regina Realty and Churchill Brewing Company for their support making this show possible. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching on YouTube, SaskTel Max TV on demand. We appreciate it. This is Ghost Behind Your Mind by Tyler Gilbert.